Welcome to Poemify podcast, the poetry and art talk show, where we celebrate the beauty and diversity of African art. Our show features interviews with African artists, poets, and other creatives who draw inspiration from the rich cultural heritage of Africa. In each episode, our host engages in a lively discussion with our guests, delving into the inspiration behind their art, the cultural significance of African work, and the role of poetry and art in promoting and preserving African culture. So, if you're a lover of art, poetry, or African culture, tune into our podcast today and join us on this exciting journey of discovery and creativity. Once again, welcome, Poemify Podcasts.
Welcome to another episode of Poemify Podcast. Please settle down and listen. Grab your popcorn if you may. I have with me Miss Dr. Paul Anozie, also known as Nzeli Scribe. Dr. Paul Anozie is a Nigerian-born writer. He's an educator, and his work has appeared in numerous publications, including the Kalahari Review, African Writer, Pride Magazine, and literally Yard. He obtained a master's and a PhD in education leadership from Nnamdi Azikiwe University and Imo State University, respectively. And he has attended the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning and has a fellowship in development research from Dataville Research LLC. See, to cut the long story short, tune in and listen. I am so excited about this interview, and you should be too. If you're ready, let's go. Welcome, sir. It's so nice to have you here. I've been looking forward to this interview like forever, and it's finally here. The day is here. It's good to have you on board. So let's get down to business about your book. I remember when I settled down to read it, and before the first chapter, it's dedicated to your mother. So your book is dedicated to your mother. Can you share what specific experience or relationship with your mom that inspired this dedication? Was there a particular moment, memory, or influence from her that shaped the way you approach such deep and layered story?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be a guest in this program, this project. I hope my voice is clear enough. If not, let me know. So, going straight to the question you asked, I wouldn't say there was something about my mother that directly influenced the story by way of the content, by way of the style. But to be honest, my mother stood out as someone who, at a point throughout my life, has been a pillar of support. Let me use a cliche common in Nigeria, a pillar of support. It came at a point, especially when I was going through a lot by way of personal crisis, and she was one of the, I couldn't count more than three, who really stood firmly, who really believed that I was passing through just a phase. So she has been consistent as very supportive. I don't really like the words expressed. So I felt in this book that I hope would go far by the grace of God. If there's anybody whom I should mention, whom I should acknowledge the magnitude of debt I owe to, that should be her. So that's why the book was dedicated to her. Thank you.
A mother's love, a mother's support is everything and more that we all need. Yes, a father is important, but there's just something different about a mother's love and support. And I'm so glad she's present to experience all your wins, and she'll be there to celebrate you in years to come. Amen. So Black Navel dives into profound themes: history, the origins of humanity, race, and intricate aspects of life that many wouldn't ordinarily explore. What inspired you to take this story in that direction?
All right, that's a good question. I also ask myself that question every day, and I know it will continue to pop up. So long as the Black Navel continues to seek his rightful audience. So, actually, there was no point where I decided. As this interview progresses, I will begin to tell you how actually the idea was born, which was actually incremental. So there was no point. I decided, okay, let me write a book that would tell the story, from a systemic point of view, including this, including that. It was done really increment as the story developed. It evolved. It was an evolution. So that being said, but then there was a part of me that believed in being bold, not shying away, so to say, from a task, because people are not familiar with it. This actually something that actually triggers me. I'm not always comfortable going to areas that are commonly trodden, especially when that particular area is overflowed. So I saw something in our present interest and taste in literature and movies that I'm not saying they're good. People do great works, but there is something about not really trying to step out of our comfort zones and our familiar territory that is characteristic of most of our artistic productions in Nigeria, and especially in Nigeria and Africa at large. So I felt, why don't we take this bold step, trying to tell a story that establishes, that portrays us in a very historical or artistic light that is on the same level of standard and with what is done elsewhere. So in doing that, I borrowed a lot of styles. I borrowed a leaf from especially the book that influenced me most in taking this style was Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code, which was actually meant to be a thriller kind of story, but it cuts across anthropology, history, religion, mysticism. So, and at the end of the day, it tells a story, a bold story that, even though from a religious point of view, we may want to disagree with. But there's kind of boldness in bringing a whole lot of things, saying things that lots of people wouldn't really want to say, and blending them together in a common, weaving a common unity, out of the disparate ideas and interests. So that was actually, I felt like, we can really do this. We can really borrow a leaf from this and do this kind of thing, and take stories that show some, hidden and neglected parts of our culture, our history, our background, and that way we'll set ourselves up, through light on the things that are unique about us, and those are the things that other people in the world look at, the uniqueness. That is what attracts.
Now, this is the power of storytelling, and I love what you did with the book. I really did. I loved it. And the part that caught me when you said areas where people shy away from, we have to tell our stories, the unique part of us, and that's beautiful to even see that someone is bold enough to tell stories that some people, or most people, are scared to tell. Thank you so much. So throughout the book, There are numerous scientific, archaeological, and historical references woven into the narrative. Do you, by chance, have a background in any of these fields, or did you immerse yourself in research specifically for this project? Because the details were detailing.
That's an interesting one. That's another interesting one. Yeah. The answer is yes and no at the same time. Let me explain. To begin with the yes, yeah, you would. So when you're telling a story that is, trying to be convincing to a reasonable extent, this is science fiction, for instance, it's not fantasy. So you are not trying to say things that are impossible, so you gotta base them on facts, on things that are within the realm of possibility. So you gotta, go down to the research and make sure that you get the facts right. Okay, so to that extent, yes, I had to research everything. But then I had already been a kind of, I had a versatile, that's not being proud, but I kind of have a versatile attitude to knowledge. So I already had, pretty much, kind of, it's a level of exposure, let me use that expression, in those areas of knowledge, in anthropology, history, philosophy, economics and stuff like that. So then I find it hard to resist, exploring those areas when I'm telling a story. It doesn't really happen intentionally. Okay, so but I find I'm compelled to move in those directions because already those are, things that I need, things that propel me, things that, that define and shape the way I see things, the way I put reality, the way I tell a story. So I did not, start reading up on archaeology because I want to write a book. It is the book that actually push me into exhuming and unearthing the knowledge of archaeology, ideas and concepts I already had. So it was the book that actually led me into fine-tuning and polishing and exploring and opening the floodgates of knowledge and, the different branches of, knowledge that I already had a modest interest in.
This is interesting, and it's interesting to know that you've had interest in these fields even before the book. Now, that explains a lot. So moving on, a central theme in the Black Navel is memory. The idea that humans can be connected or even defined by their memories. Why did you choose memory as the core element for the story? And what led you to think, oh, this is the concept that can hold such speculative, profound narrative together?
All right. This is a very tough one, I must confess. There wasn't at any point when I decided to use memory as the central plank which to, build the story. And like I said earlier, the Black Navel as a story was mostly evolutionary. When I started writing it, if you must know, and I think you need to know, there was none of the characters, the story was not already made, it was not sitting in my head waiting to be written. I knew none of the characters with the exception a little bit of Dr. Jason. Maybe I'll still tell you why I knew Dr. Jason a little bit. But beyond the first 2 pages of the story that I had then, I didn't know anything. So, but I put pen on paper. It started to take shape. It started to flow. I started having ideas, So that was actually how the concept of memory as the central, the binding force of the story came up. It was not pre-planned or premeditated. Yes, but in the course of time, I felt it was something that connected with my own personal experiences, especially at that point in life when I was also going through a whole lot of personal reevaluation and rethinking. So, to a reasonable extent, I was speaking to myself. He spoke to myself, the writing, So, I found it one of those things that I found about the book that was unique and that was deep. They had a whole lot of possibilities and a whole lot of um, uh, potentials for expansion, for application in other fields, in other genre, and in other ways. And so I stuck with it. So that's how the idea of memory came up. It was not pre-planned. It was not, forethought. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving us insight to how memory came to be, even if it wasn't pre-planned. Okay, let's get into the characters now. Dr. Jason. We're starting with the character of Dr. Jason. You see that Dr. Jason, yeah? His character stood out strongly in the book. He came across as very knowledgeable, yet often dismissive and unwilling to accept realities that did not align to his beliefs. Even though we all know scientists are usually seen as curious and open to discoveries. What inspired you to create him this way? Was there a particular reason behind shaping him as a character who resisted certain truths until the very end? Because at the point, I was like, Dr. Jason, can you just calm down and listen? Listen, what is wrong with you? So, how did his character come to be?
That is so funny. Actually, you're taking him a little bit more seriously than he actually deserves. But I appreciate it. So one of the hallmarks of artistic creation is to create a character that resonates with people, either for good or for bad. So to that extent, I would say that is a pass mark. So let me get straight to the answer to the question. Dr. Jason was not alone. Almost all the characters were stubborn. They were meant to be stubborn. They were meant to resist other attempts, other previous. As a matter of fact, I heard Dr. Ibe was much more clung to his own views than Dr. Jason was. Maybe because of the way he was he was not really he was not really a very plain person. He was a little bit tactful and a little bit jovial and paternal in his approach. And that was why at the end of the day, it was he that was called to, it was his own stance on the matter that was addressed by the stranger who came in where the resolution of the story was happening. Okay. Now, let me tell you something about this story that will not be any occasion to talk about. This is an allegory, and it's a story that uses symbols or events or objects to tell a different story. So the characters really represented different things. And what is it all about? This book essentially is what we call, those of us in the area of philosophy, especially as it relates to education, call it epistemology, the theory of knowledge. How do we know what we know? How much can we know? To what extent can we say this idea, this pattern of learning, this style of understanding is superior to this or that, or what, and this and that? You may have an idea what I'm talking about already. So this book set out one of those things about it that was also accidental. Permit me to use that word. So it set out to explore the various ways in which it was actually meant to be a book that attacks stubbornness in clinging to a single story. So, but first of all, you had to allow the characters to cling to a single story. And then through their stubbornness and their failings and the failures in their perspective, in their views, in their understanding, to show how they were in error. So Dr. Jesu was not alone. Just that his own particular character, there was something about his character that portrayed him as stubborn, self-opinionated. But then they were all the same. I could go on and on to tell you what the different characters represent. So if you take the book to a level, a much more literal reading of the book, if you go beyond the literal reading of the book, what it is saying that, for instance, it is talking about the different types of knowledge and types of intelligence, if you could say. There is scientific knowledge, for instance, and some people cling onto it and say it offers the exclusive road or avenue to understanding reality. Prophecy Ibe is the chief representative. That was his style. Scientific knowledge is knowledge derived from scientific methods. It's often a combination of practical and theoretical methods. So he was the first person who pursued this, line of this methodology in understanding the summa summarum of the novel, which is Constance. Constance is the person who represented knowledge, and they were like, everybody's looking at her, trying to understand her, and looking at her, unfortunately, from their own perspectives, from their own backgrounds, from their own idiosyncrasies, their subjectivities, their training, and all that. So there we also have artistic knowledge, which is knowledge related to creative expression. Chude was the grandmaster of this. So Chude always, tried to, be artistic, poetic, jovial, funny, and that way tried to get his ideas around to explain his perspectives. So there is also practical knowledge, which is knowledge gained through experience. Prof. Ibe was also, that is Dr. Ibe, was so a proponent of this type of knowledge. Peter was also a proponent, and Cross was a proponent of practical knowledge gained in the course of understanding human beings and human nature, and learning and failing and learning and rising and falling again. There's also theoretical knowledge, which is knowledge derived from abstract concepts. Dr. Jessen was principally motivated to pursuing and applying theoretical knowledge. Speculative knowledge is knowledge gained through reliance on reasoning and inference rather than empirical evidence. Some people call this authoritative knowledge, authoritarianism. And Peter was, most people in the humanities, in literature and religion are authoritarian inclined. They tell you based on logic, based on reason, without really stepping out of the confines of reason to find out how things happen, applies in reality. Okay, so it is a deductive kind of knowledge. And we also have functional knowledge that confers ease of performance of complex tasks. And Cross was a representative of this type of thinking. Intuitive knowledge that arises from instinct or subconscious patterns. It's not necessarily based on conscious reason or logic, and it often feels right or true without clear justification. Again, this calls to mind Chude. We have persuasive knowledge, which uses persuasive techniques to create knowledge or to convince others. Often, it employs one, some, or all of such techniques like pathos, ethos, manipulation of language or logic, and strategic use of ambiguity. Constance and Pepe were mostly driven to using this. In fact, that was Pepe's exclusive method of operation, of interpretation, of getting things down. So that is what this book is all about. It is an attack on exclusive knowledge, what Chimamanda Adichie calls the danger of a single story. And in a world that is much more getting increasingly characterized by exclusionism, by intolerance, by ideas that they tend to sweep other ideas on the carpet and declare supremacy or whatever. We need to begin to, give room for a holistic kind of a type of knowledge, a stance to understanding reality that gives room to other ideas, other perspectives that admits, the strengths, of other perspectives and other people, and that, accepts the weaknesses and understands the subjectivities in the perspectives that we hold dear, and that way create room for harmony and for cooperation.
Thank you so much for the detailed explanation. Now it's clear. We understand. I understand. Alright, so moving on to the next question. As the story unfolds, we see that memory and history of the Igbo people are central themes. But towards the end, reincarnation also emerges as a powerful thread. For example, Constance and Dr. Jason are revealed as reincarnated siblings from centuries past. And later, Cross and Pepe became the next generation of reincarnates. What inspired you to weave memory, Igbo tradition, and reincarnation together? And most especially, how did you arrive at the idea that these three concepts could be tied into the core of the story? Because when it comes to reincarnation, I am always hooked. I love reading stories about reincarnation because you don't see it coming. You can't just wrap your head around it, and you just be like, how did this come to be? Now that I have the opportunity to interview a writer who has written a reincarnation story, if I can put it like that, what's the core? How did you arrive at the idea of this?
All right, good question. It's an interesting one, but somehow complicated, but I will try and answer. It's one of those things that was that developed as the book, as the story developed. I guess it's all boiled down to where the story is coming from. There's always an artistic mind, through which every work of art, for those of us who believe in the power of inspiration, so there is always a particular mind. Just like every mind has a content, every sediment of precious rock or precious metal, so it might contain bitumen, might contain, fossil fuel as iron, which might contain gold. It depends. So when you mine it, it will only give what it has inside. So to a reasonable extent, I didn't even have any control over what I didn't choose this. So, but they kept coming. What I did was to just give them vent, give them vent, the opening through which they gushed out, as the way I can put it. So, well, coming to my understanding of reincarnation and all that, and the Igbo story that was woven together, it is one of those things I would not tell you this is what I think with certainty, with facts, because then again that would negate the spirit and the cause that they spoke is trying to champion. The idea is trying to, just to propagate or to sell or to convince people about that there are certain things about us, about nature, that we cannot really say with certainty that this is it. We cannot really subject to scientific explanation and description and get you to understand that these are aspects of reality and understanding, especially about our everyday nature, that there's not neither white or black but gray, that continues to fritter along the edges of our understanding, that's on the blood line, the line between what is knowable and what is not knowable. And so long as we are humans, and so long as our capacities remain where they are at this point, it will be difficult, if not understanding, for us to perfectly understand, explain, to predict, and to control. Okay, so I have that understanding. that for maybe for some time to come, we always believe that there are certain things that we know are possible. But if you ask us to say exactly what they are, how they happen, everybody will be telling different stories, giving different accounts, depending on their own understanding. If you look at the two quotations that we are actually meant to be a guidepost, some kind of giving an idea of the motif behind the book or behind the story. You see a quote by Dr. Bradley Minnick and another one by what is this woman on Quora that I quoted, Louis. So one is saying, talking about it beyond the realm of explanation, but at the end of the day, can jump up for us the belief in the possible. So they're beyond the realm of explanation, but then it also makes us understand that things are possible even when we don't really know what makes them possible, why they are possible, why they happen, how they happen. And Louis is talking about scientists, becoming spiritual the deeper they research. And that has been the fate, the situation, the experience of many scientists. At the point you come to the point where, yes, I know scientific laws apply, but then there are things that I know that happen, they're there, but they defy scientific explanation. I cannot really say, and I believe they are there. They cannot be dismissed, and they may even be superior to us, offer a superior idea of a reality or existence or whatever. But then our scientific tools are too, maybe say, weak or not developed enough to grasp them or to explain them, or maybe never. So that is how I approach the idea of reincarnation in this story and other stories that are connected with it. Thank you.
That's deep, and I do understand where you're coming from. I understand 101%. I do. Thank you so much for the explanation. Moving on to the next question. Yet we're looking at another character, and this is Professor Ibe. Now, he's one of the most intriguing parts of the book also because of his obsession with thunderstrikes. He seemed convinced that being struck by lightning could make a person whole again. And this pursuit, we see, runs from the beginning of the story to the end. What inspired you to use thunderstrikes in this way? And why present them as a form of healing, especially when lightning is not a regular occurrence in the real world?
Okay. This seems like you're coming from it's a little bit more critical than the other question, but that's fine. That's what it should be. Dr. Ibe is a use of thunderstrikes. Like I told you somewhere at the beginning of the interview, science fiction, what differentiates science fiction, in my own understanding, from fantasy, both of them belong to the same umbrella of speculative fiction. Well, science fiction are those things that can be possible yesterday, today, or tomorrow. But fantasy may never be. That is my own personal definition of it, if you ask me. So for us to use thunderstrikes, then it means that I believe it is something that can happen. That's number one. Number two, it is not just something that can happen. It goes with the facts. Dr. Ibe based his research on what we call the lunar nodal cycle. So this is scientific enough. Every 18.5 years it happens. And how did the idea of thunderstrikes come in as a therapeutic force? Well, I cannot really claim it has happened before, but then there's something about medicine healing that I don't really know how to explain it, but somehow you see negative and positive come together and produce, just like we say, when thesis combines with synthesis, and when there is thesis and synthesis, there will be an antithesis, something like that. So in medicine, you find that somehow when you just like, let me take you straight to the science of inoculation. They say when Edward Jenner discovers smallpox, the cure for smallpox, inoculation or vaccination is well, what is vaccination? Introducing a vaccine, the same vaccine that into the body of an animal, of a human being, in order to prevent a virus of that same category, but not exactly the same what do you call it, the genus of or species to enter the body of that person. Okay, so there is something that we call akubara, in my own local culture growing up. Akubara is a kind of seed plant that is almost useless to our own understanding, and also it has a tormenting effect. It causes body rashes of the highest magnitude. If you enter the forest or the bush, and if the wings of the seed just are very tiny particles that look like small needles that they happen to they spray on your body, then you have very serious scratches. And how do we heal it in those days? If you come home scratching, crying, rolling yourself on the sand, your parents will just get coconut, break it into two, and then rub your body with coconut. And what does coconut do? Coconut scratches you, raw coconut. When you peel off the outer layerings, it scratches the hand and it scratches the body. So if you add scratch on scratch, it stops the scratch. Okay, and finally find that sometimes when you have sudden accidents, I've read about people who had brain accidents, brain problem, and they fell and they hit that same brain, their head on the ground, and they became well. And people, stuff like that happen all the time. There are people who have been transformed from being dunces to being geniuses just because they hit their head on the ground. People, something that would have been an accident, like it's often fatal. Okay, and vice versa. It happens also in an opposite way. So if somebody had, based on this assumption, this theoretical assumption, Dr. Ibe, theorized or hypothesized that if somebody had a thunder strike already and they had another thunder strike again, then it will be a healing. And then he also drew inspiration for a real life event. The idea of multiple thunder strikes, even though it's statistically debatable, but it is real, has happened according to the facts. I cannot really be there to prove this 100%, but you can Google it. It's a common fact, the story of Watasuma Ford, which Dr. Ibe mentioned somewhere in the story. Somebody who was struck by lightning 3 times while he was alive, and the 4th when he died. You could say at the end of the day, it's one of those things, if it was true, one of those things that we cannot really understand, and why would he choose it as the basis of his science? But then, remember, this is also a fiction. And at the beginning, he was said that he is championing a new branch of knowledge, astrocosmology. So we should give him the liberty to experiment and explore things that would actually form the cornerstone of this new science. It is from his trials and errors that a new body of knowledge of things that are certain, things that are acceptable, and things that are possibly generalizable will be produced. So to that extent, yes, you could say it is not a common idea or knowledge, but based on these foundational issues and these approaches, then it was not stupid or foolhardy for Dr. Ibe to believe that lightning strikes could be both have the force of thanatos and therapy at the same time, that is destroying and healing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Black Navel is set in Nigeria, particularly Enugu. yet it explores themes that are not commonly delved into or widely perceived in Nigerian literature. What made you choose to set such a speculative sci-fi story in Nigeria? What inspired you to bring these complex themes into the context or into a context where they're not usually explored?
This strikes a chord. This question strikes a chord with a previous question you asked me about what made me to tell such a story. I think that kind of thing. I talked about being bold, about telling our stories and trying to be unique. And not just about trying to be unique, but trying to replicate what others have done in other parts of the world in our own, trying to show that ours is as good as others. Now, there's one particular trend I've discovered in our artistic expression, especially in literature and in film. We tend to tell the same story. We talk about, for instance, the Nigerian Civil War, talk about it a whole lot. And I'm not saying it is not good to talk about the past, the hurt, the distractions or whatever, the trauma that the people or a person or people feel or felt, because that is actually an avenue to a better future for those who would appreciate it, from that perspective of healing, of caution, of warning. Yeah. So, but sometimes we overflog these issues. We rid ourselves of artistic of variance of what do you call it again? Diversity. If we continue to tell, that single story, okay. But if you look elsewhere, you find that people are bold to take up their stories that they travel to the moon, that they come back. It's not as if there's nothing, too strange about the story and where it is based. It is about us not doing it often. It's not being commonly done among us. It's not as if we don't have intellectuals like Dr. Jason or Dr. Ibe. We have people who are far more brilliant than that in Nigeria. You would know what I'm saying is true. Yeah, but why don't we normally cast them in our works of art? Art is supposed to be a replica of real life events. Why do we really go to those? Just like water, why do we really flow to the line of least resistance for crying out loud? So we should be able to say that we are good enough to think about, to have intellectual quest, to have people, professors, learners, science scholars, especially from the roadside, not from the citadel of learning. I'm one of those who do not really believe that, just like David Thoreau would say, brilliant ideas come as well from the streets or the forest or whatever, and not necessarily from the parliaments or the pulpit. So if you look at the characters I portray, none of them is from the establishment. The one Dr. Ibe, who was a professor, is not even teaching at the moment. He was sacked. If you look at Dr. Jason, you could call him a brilliant man, but he was not working for any big corporation, any big brand. He considered himself even a failure from the social standards of his time and country, where you need to be working with this big general hospital, this big government to be considered successful. And if you look at even children, he was not working for any big national daily. These are not conventional people from the everyday sense of the world. So back to what I was saying, we need to be able to tell the world that we are people who can really go, who have sound intellectual standing, who can tackle complex issues, who have rocket science level thinkers, because we have them. So why can't we tell them? Why shouldn't we tell them in stories? It's really beggars the imagination that we shy away from these things. The stories about simple stories, about primary storytelling, starting from a single plot, single narrative, single days again. Well, we tell brilliant stories. Most of these stories succeed, even much more than the ones I've done. But I believe that the crux of artistic creativity is to defy the trend, to step out of your comfort zone. So I started by telling a story, and I felt that you needed to weave a plot that was just, I believe storytelling should look like something like basket making. Instead of you set out the nose, the branches of the basket, or rather the arms, or whatever you call the things that you weave. So you set them apart into different directions, but at the end you keep weaving them together, bringing them together, stitching them together. And that is what a story becomes. So a plot should be complex, should be challenging, and then a reader who is not persevering might not be patient enough to wait till you get to the point where they all make sense. Do you understand? So that's why we set the story in Enugu, because I believe Nigeria is good enough. I know one of my critics, when I started the story, the first person who read it from the publishing house said, you can't just write a story that doesn't look like Nigeria, that looks like it is set in the moon or something like that. And I looked at it, I was like, for me, this is bullshit. This is not set in Nigeria. We're not talking about things that are not happening. We're not describing spaceships or rocket ships or things that are happening in advanced world or don't even happen at all, that happen only in the space. We're talking about cars, ordinary cars that we know, Volkswagen Beetle, that people no longer even use. We use the ordinary houses, bungalows, the normal street, the normal people, the normal food. Even we go lower than that. So we don't use any complex tools. So what is so un-Nigerian about it? It is just because we've conditioned our mind to believe that we in Nigeria are not capable of telling complex stories, of casting people in with high intelligence who at the same time identify. High intelligence doesn't mean, like I said, that you will be an elite. No. You can also come from the streets and do amazing things, solve complex problems, tackle the serious issues, and also bring humor, while doing it. The fact that you belong to a college of professors or thinkers, it should not make you to be barricaded from the simple humor of everyday, lives and stuff like that. I don't know if I've not answered the story. You can ask me this question. You can ask me again so that I can also stop where I stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You answered the question. You did. And I love that it was in Nigeria, in Enugu. It was a part of the story, and that was just beautiful. I know I say beautiful a lot, but it's beautiful to be African, to be Nigerian, and then still come back to your roots to see how you can portray the beauty of the nation, of home. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to touch the last character, and this one, I'm not attacking anybody. I want to talk about Chud. Chud was such a standout character. He was mischievous, funny, and sharp-witted. His jokes added so much life to the story, even in serious moments. And his pairing with Dr. Jason, he felt like the perfect contrast. So what was the idea behind creating Chud? Did you intentionally design him as a comic relief, or did his character evolve naturally, as you explained earlier, that the story just built up? Did he evolve naturally as you developed the story, or was he planned? Because Chud was everything. No, he was witty, he was funny, he was good, he was cool.
All right. What you said about today is also is very. I'm happy, excited to hear this. That means he's one of the successful characters actually in the book, and you're not just the first person saying it. So I'm happy Jude survived, became more appreciated more than anybody. I didn't think about it as writing the book, but that's how he evolved. So I don't think it was out of place. I didn't really consciously design, but it's something in the nature of creativity to create a foil to, especially the main character. Okay, so that you try to create a balance. I know Dr. Jason is boring. My readers who read this before it got published told me, trusted readers, that it was so boring. I couldn't change it because that was what he was. That is who he is. To be in the present. And so you can't really change it. So the best thing is to get a colleague, who is a contrast. And I'm happy she has succeeded in playing that role. I didn't really set out to, spend a whole lot of resources in trying to create Chide to be perfect. It just came out that way. I call it the grace of God. Okay, so it's one of those things I'm grateful for. So that's how Chide came up to be a foil to this guy who is so boring, but he has to be himself for him to stand out, for him to also have his own personality. So you have to have this other guy who is witty, sharp. Yeah, so that's as much I have to say about Chide and the way he contrasted with Dr. Jesso right now. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad he was a successful character, so I am glad. Okay, if you could sit down for dinner with one of your characters, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's a very interesting one. That's actually looks like gives me a real life, gives a real life feeling to you because I can already imagine myself sitting there with my characters. And I'll get straight to give you an answer. The answer, I thought you could have guessed that by now, is Constance. Okay. Because that is the crux of the matter. That is the nitty-gritty of the story. And not just that, that is the only character I do not understand. I would not, naturally go to places where I would get something new. Okay, and Dr. Jesse, for instance, I know that dude so well. I need to confess that I know Dr. Jesse much more than any other person. So I know that dude. So I've known him for much longer than anybody knows. But Constance, I don't know her. I don't really know her till tomorrow. I don't know what she's up to. I don't know what she's capable of. I don't know what what inspires her, what she's going to, So I would like to sit down on the table with Constance so as to be able to afford maybe a better glimpse into who she really is.
Do you see yourself writing more sci-fi stories set in Nigeria, or would you want to explore something completely different?
Okay, I didn't really set out to write sci-fi to begin with, so I don't think I'll be writing more sci-fi much. Even though at a point, the Black Navel was built to be part of a trilogy of 3 stories. And if you take a deeper reading of the book, you would notice, for instance, I know most of my readers fail to notice that by intention, the reason why Constance remained unknowable to reason based on to the end is so that you could still have the need to know how we could elicit more search in subsequent times, in subsequent occasions. We can still, and the reason why her death was not really an issue of finality, whether she really, that skull that the girl at the end to whom it belonged was not really something you could say with certainty, was because somebody might decide tomorrow, now we're taking up this quest to another level. So to that extent, I've already planned doing a trilogy. But beyond that, I don't intend to continue because actually I have other areas of literature and the genres that I'm interested in. We actually had some kind of, growing up, my education, my training, my passion, my heroes were all in the realism school. Chinua Achebe, Christopher Kibo, Olisaeloka, Femi Osofisam, all this, Nigerian, West African, European world realism writers are people who inspired me and people I thought I would take in their footsteps. I didn't know I took a pen and then Black Navel followed. Yes, I had some kind of exposure to reading thrillers, to I enjoy complex plots a lot. Maybe that's why I enjoy, big problems and then solutions, giving solutions. So maybe that's how the sci-fi was born. But beyond this story, perhaps any other strand of story or stream of story that could develop from it, I don't intend to build a career, so to say, in the sci-fi genre.
Thank you so much. This is going to be the last question, and it's just for fun. If you could borrow one of the powers, concepts, or experiences in Black Navel and leave it for a day, which one would you pick?
Thank you so much for the last question. And actually, this last question somehow going to be the first, the way I want to say it. And there's something about the Black Navel, about Dr. Jason, like I've told you I knew him, was because I don't know if this is the right place to say, but I do a whole lot from me. I poured out my frustration in creating that character. And so that need he had to solve a problem that was professional oriented, that was spiritual, those challenges, were also, they strike a chord with me. Especially it was very much more insistent when I was writing the book. So I would like the power of the bidimensional view to be able to, go to a shop, take my memories, keep it, take another, put in my head, or whatever it is that will afford me a better view of my life and my taste, my judgment, the way I see things, so that I can have a much better angle at decision making. Okay, so I think therein lies the central aspect of the book, which is balance. The best way to achieve balance is to see things from different perspectives, because just like the proponents of determinism will say, or the critics of determinism will say, the way we see things is colored, is affected or shaped even by the color of our eyes. By the color of our eyes even determines it. So if we had to, our eyes, for instance, the implication were to the color of our eyes to be different, then we will see things. If we are color blind, for instance, you wouldn't see the different shades of colors. So I think one of the things that I could, if it is possible, make our judgments, our choices, our perspective, our opinions to be better, to be shaped in a much more balanced and nuanced way to accommodate all that. If we have the power to see things from other perspective, to step out of our own experience, to stand somewhere in the middle and have a clearer view of things.
Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence on this platform. It was an amazing interview. I loved every second of it. I appreciate you so much, sir.
Thank you. Have a lovely day. It was my pleasure actually to be hosted by you, and I look forward to much to other engagements, richer and more rewarding engagements subsequently.
Joining me next week is one of our top 3 winners of the Pendleton Poetry Chapbook Prize, Emmanuel Yamba. You do not want to miss it for anything, because as I'm hosting winners like this, that means you're next in line. So please do not miss next week's podcast, because it's going to be interesting as he takes us on the tour on how his book won him 2nd place. See you next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Poemify Podcast. We hope you enjoyed every bit of it. Did you? If yes, do well to share with your art-loving friends. It's the least you can do for art's sake, you know. See you on the next episode.